Seaweed is a sustainable resource. It has so many possible applications, and cultivating seaweed is also climate friendly. We think it will be an important part of our future.
Bringing seaweed onto everyone's radar is necessary to unlock developing markets. At this stage, it's especially important to keep in mind the potential diversity of a new seaweed value chain. And gathering stakeholders and competences from across the world, like at this conference, will bring us closer to realizing this full potential.
Research has shown that the ocean waters around in our region is perfect for cultivating seaweed. But we still need more knowledge on how to grow, harvest, and process seaweeds in a more effective and industrialized way. To do that, we need to cooperate with other players all around the world to find the best available methods.
Macroalgae represent a new and interesting raw material for food, medicine, and health supplements. As an industry player in the health category, GC Rieber Vivomega will look closely at how we can contribute to the growth in this field.
Sea to Market is a conference series about commercializing new sustainable products from the ocean. This year's conference is called Algemania and tries to answer some of the many questions about how to create a successful seaweed industry.
Welcome to day 2 of the Sea to Market Algemania conference. I'm still Rebecca Varne, and I'll be your host. Algemania is a collaboration between Møre Romsdal County Municipality, Campus Kristiansund, Møreforsking Research Center, the Royal Norwegian Society for Development, Molde College, Vindel Innovation Company, and Kristiansund and Møre Business Network. I also want to thank our sponsors, Sparebanken Møre og Studentbyen Kristiansund. During this conference, we want to interact with you digitally, and doing that, we will use a tool called Menti. You can use your smartphone or your PC. Go to www.menti.com and use the code 73815347. We will also post this code and the address in our chat. If you want to ask questions for the speakers, please use our Q&A section or just the chat, and I will ask the questions for you for the speakers. Our first speaker today is Pierrick Stevant. Pierrick, are you with us?
Yes.
Perfect. Please make your presentation ready. And you are a PhD. You have a PhD in processing and quality of marine seaweeds. You are working at Møreforsking, and you have participated in many seaweed projects. Today, you will tell us about the shared facilities for processing of cultivated seaweeds, of practical solutions to upscale the industry. And the screen is yours, Pierrick. Please unmute yourself and start your presentation.
Do you see my presentation now? Do you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, it's on full screen. Perfect.
Okay. Yes. So thank you for the introduction. So I'm a researcher at Møreforsking. So my background is more into biology, biochemistry, and food science. But since this is the Sea to Market conference, I thought I would leave out the hardcore science for today and talk more about practical things related to to the seaweed industry, and namely the shared facilities for processing of cultivated seaweeds, and can that be a practical solution to upscale the industry? So I can already answer this question. Yes, it can be. So I will talk more into detail about this. So first, I would like to say some words about the Norwegian seaweed industry. So as everyone knows, Norway has a long coastline, has a well-established aquaculture sector. So it has pretty good conditions for developing seaweed industry. There are more and more actors engaged in seaweed production at different levels. The public authorities also, either national or regional, are more involved in this, as they see the potential, industrial potential for it. And there are more cultivation permits that are granted. But still, the production is limited. So in 2020, it's been below 200 tons of almost exclusively sugar kelp and wing kelp. I think the figures for this year will be a bit higher, but somewhere between 300 and 400 tons. And there are only a few established products that are based on cultivated seaweeds. So there are different reasons for that, but generally what we can say is this industry is yet immature, in the sense that it needs to be upscaled to be profitable, and this implies capital investment that and financial power that that is hard for individual players to support themselves. So as the Møre and Romsdal County Council sees the potential in seaweed industry for the region, we have been in dialogue since we also we have done some work on seaweed production in a research perspective, and so they assigned us to investigate the concept of a shared landing facility for cultivated seaweeds, and how this can help the seaweed industry, the emerging industry. So to do so, we conducted a stakeholder study. So basically, to get a snapshot of the current seaweed industry. So this was done last year in 2020, and yeah, we wanted to cover what are the current commercial applications for cultivated seaweed. What are the methods that are used to harvest, but also to conserve and process the seaweed, as we know that this is a very critical step. I will come back to that later. What are the challenges with kelp processing, and what are the stakeholders' opinions about a shared facility for cultivated seaweed? So we conducted semi-structured interviews of different categories of industrial players. We had 7 seaweed cultivators, as we thought that we needed more information, especially from this group. So 2 of these respondents were foreign European companies, and yeah, all these seaweed cultivators were established companies with background of seaweed production for several years. So we could say that they are in a pre-commercial stage, like not newcomers. We also interviewed technology suppliers, which were mainly suppliers of drying technology from pilot to large scale. And we also interviewed industrial potential large industrial users of seaweed biomass, which were from the food industry and the feed, animal feed industry. So from this dialogue, we collected a lot of data, and well, from the dialogue with seaweed producers, it came out that the seaweed producers are involved at several levels of the value chain. That means that they don't only cultivate seaweed, but they also process it, and they do product development. So they're involved in different steps. So we can say that this is a relatively low level of specialization if you compare it to, for instance, the salmon industry or other established industries. So this was considered as an advantage for some companies, that they think that they have a better control over the production and the portfolio of products, while for other companies this was rather perceived negatively, as it is difficult for them to succeed in the different steps of the production. Food is the main market for the cultivated seaweed of the people we interviewed. Well, this was not a big surprise, but we got it confirmed at least. So it's either B2B retail or internal product development, or a mix of both. But usually the products, they have limited distribution. We can call it more or less niche products. And the producers stress that there are strict quality requirements that are not always easy to meet regarding the food safety, organic certification, traceability, and in addition, there may be some specific customer requirements on how the product should look like or taste like. On the other hand, there is a demand from the food industry to use the seaweed and to get it into products with potentially large distribution. So I picked up a quote from the respondent from the food industry, who is pointing that if they will use the seaweed ingredients in their production, so the seaweed production has to upscale, and it has also to be efficient, as the seaweed products need to be competitive price-wise with other food ingredients. And large food distribution also calls for more knowledge on product quality and especially safety. It's been mentioned several times, the issue of kelp and iodine, for instance, and also more knowledge on how the different processes that are used affect the sensory characteristics of the product, like flavor and texture, for instance. Yeah, feed was also another important market for seaweed producers, where kelp is used as an ingredient in animal nutrition products. This is generally B2B retail that require rather large volumes to be profitable. The requirements for quality and especially for safety are also strict, but somehow not so strict as the requirements for food, for other quality traits, like the presence of biofouling organisms, for instance. And we also we thought it was very important to get information on how the biomass is handled after harvest, since we know that there are major constraints with kelp harvesting. That the kelp biomass needs to be quickly handled within hours after harvest to avoid degradation. And another thing is that often large quantities are harvested in a short time frame, within a few weeks in early summer to avoid the biofouling of the biomass. So these are major constraints for the large-scale production, and we find out that fermentation was used by a large majority of seaweed producers to stabilize their biomass. So now this is done by either adding lactic acid bacteria to the seaweeds that will use fermentable sugars to produce acid, which will inhibit the growth of microbial microbia that would degrade the product. Alternatively, also sugar may be added to the mix to speed up the process, or directly acid. So this is a rather a new method that has been increasingly relevant since about 2016. It's for most of the producers, it's at the development stage, but generally the producers have a very positive opinion about this process, that it's low, it doesn't require a lot of energy, and it doesn't also require a lot of advanced equipment, so that it can be combined with the mechanical harvest of the biomass on board a boat, for instance. But there's still missing knowledge on the quality of the product and the stability of fermented kelp. And regarding the quality, also, it's been it's a call for more knowledge on the pre and probiotic characteristics of the product. But they all say that this is very promising process that can extend the production season. It's a cheap way to buy some time to extend the harvesting and production season. Drying is the conventional method for conserving seaweeds that is used also by many of the interviewed actors. Dried seaweeds can be used in a variety of end products. It has a long shelf life. The downside is that it's very energy demanding. This we've evaluated to more than 7,000 kilowatt-hour per ton dry product, which is equivalent to about 370 euros per ton dry product, considering the energy price for industrial processes here in Norway. And this is only for the cost of energy of drying, and it often is a need for manual work also. That also has a cost. So this is pointed by several actors, the need for efficient drying solution, for onboard drying, drying of fermented seaweed, for instance. Freezing is also used, but not by so many. Several actors actually points that there are a lot of costs also associated with conditioning of the seaweed prior to freezing. So after that, we wanted to hear about what the stakeholders think of the concept of a shared facility for cultivated seaweed, and they are generally positive to the concept. That the main argument for it is to share knowledge, especially across sector, share investment and operational costs, and to enable to develop target processes and delivering high quality products at low cost. This was also highlighted as very important by the technology supplier, and sometimes missing in previous attempts to develop technology for processing of seaweed. So for such a facility to be attractive for seaweed producers, it has also practical constraints. For instance, transport time. They say that transport time of fresh seaweed longer than 2 hours is too long. There are also quality requirements that should be met. So it's been suggested also by several that a technical and logistical solution for the conservation on site, for instance by fermentation, and then transport to the facility would be very helpful in that case. And they all agree that the year-round operation of the facility is a must to be profitable. So we also looked at other factors that are important to consider for this concept of a shared facility for cultivated seaweed. That the roles and the function of the facility must be defined early in the process. The roles can be from pilot testing to large-scale processing. It can involve the reception of fresh biomass, stabilization of the production on site. It can be also involved in marketing and sales, as in agricultural cooperatives, for instance. So this has to be defined. And there are also this was factors, more general factors to the concept, and we also looked at more regional factors when it comes to establishing this in Møre-Romsdal county. And it's important to identify complementers. That means industrial players that have their core business, but who can impact the seaweed industry and the facility, shared facility, positively. So this can be suppliers of excess heat. We identified 3 of them in the region. It can be education and research centers. We have an establishing campus in Kristiansund. There is the Norwegian Technical University in Trondheim and Ålesund, University College in Molde, and research institutes such as Møreforsking and SINTEF also, who are engaged in seaweed research. Offshore and subsea industry is very relevant when considering the offshore cultivation of seaweeds, aquaculture, maritime operations, and so on. The customers would be obviously food industry, feed industry, and cosmetics would be relevant. Suppliers and competitors, in that case, that would be other products that would compete with the seaweed products itself. So this is important to map. And there are other factors that would influence the seaweed industry, which are national or international regulatory framework. That include marine coastal planning, licensing procedures at sea, and reduced tax on low carbon emission that may facilitate or not the seaweed production on a large scale. So there are a lot of conclusions that we can draw from this study, and I invite the participants to sign up for the group session later that on the topic of industrial seaweed processing. That we can go more into detail on this topic, but more generally, the shared landing facility for cultivated seaweed can stimulate the synergy across stakeholders to upscale the seaweed processing, as it will lower the financial threshold for establishing technology and developing the technology. That also can lead to a higher degree of specialization and a better resource utilization of financial resources. Also, public support is very important to increase the attractivity for private stakeholders to invest in the seaweed industry. So related to that, I also mentioned, it was mentioned previously, but the Møre and Romsdal County Council is in the process of establishing a joint stock company called Ocean Seaweed Center. They will have a group session on that this afternoon. And basically, the objective of this company is to provide access to cultivation sites at sea in exposed condition, and a pilot landing facility for processing seaweeds. So thank you. That was it from me. I put some relevant links here for those who want to read more about the study. Yes, so there is an open access study and a report more into the organizational aspect of such a processing facility in Norwegian language for those who can. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Yeah, we have used your research as a basis for our Ocean Seaweed Center, so very, very interesting. And I noticed you said that we need full all year round production in any facility, and I think that means we also have to include other types of species or other animals or resources, and that will be a challenge. But that's something.
Yeah, there are two ways of looking at the problem: either to extend the production season of cultivated seaweed, or to process other raw material, wild harvested seaweed, or products from fisheries and aquaculture, for instance, during the low season for cultivated seaweed.
Well, you got two questions, Pierre, very like technical specific questions, which I think you like a lot. The first one was, how did you measure the markets? Did you use weight sold, or how did you measure the markets of like food, feed, cosmetics?
No, also it was also we didn't. It was more a qualitative analysis. So this was based on interviews with stakeholders, and we didn't measure how much how much biomass is sold to this or that market. This was often an information that the companies didn't want to to disclose, but yeah, that was more. Unfortunately, we did not quantify this. But in terms of volumes, I had the feeling that that feed was kind of the highest output market. But also there was a big differences in how much the different companies produced in seaweed. So it can give kind of a skewed image of what's the total market output.
And one last question: how was the drying energy calculated?
This was based on a calculation that we did in a previous project, based on a conventional convective drying, shelf drying, basically. This we are writing the paper at the moment, but yes, it was to evaluate the energy consumption of moisture remover during this process.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pierre. Our next person on the screen is Lars Erik Johansen. I can see you are with us, Lars Erik. How are you? Yes, well, I'm just going to introduce you for a short while now. Lars Erik Johansen is originally from Fredrikstad in Norway. He is now living in Utah in the US. You has had a long career within natural resources, and you have taken 2 companies public. You are an entrepreneur and a seed investor. And I have to add that you also are a Norwegian consular in the US, and you are now in Washington, D.C., which means it's in the middle of the night. I'm very impressed that you look so awake and fresh. Your speak today will be a practical introduction to fundraising and an opportunity to ask the questions you always wanted to ask. The screen is yours, Lars Erik. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, Lars Johansen here, born and raised in Norway, living in the US now. And I'm an explosives and fertilizer guy. As you may know, explosives and fertilizers travel together. I took one company public in Australia, and after that I've been working on my own investments in various sectors. And there's a parallel here, Rebecca, that we didn't talk about earlier. But one of my businesses is also about extracting resources from marine or water bodies. One of my projects is to get fertilizers from, in the western US we have a lot of desert, and in the deserts we have salt lakes, and the salt in these salt lakes is called potash, and it's a very strong fertilizer, very premium fertilizer that's used. So that's a parallel we didn't really talk about earlier that I wanted to mention. As I prepared for this conference, I talked to a couple of the participants, and I was thinking about the industry, early stage startup. And so the theme of my presentation is to be around what are the things that I wish I knew before I entered into entrepreneurship and business. So some of these comments are really, this is kind of the stuff I wish I knew before I started my businesses. So that's kind of the theme here. So page 2, please. So when you talk about fundraising and getting a new shareholder, please be aware that this is about a lot more than just money. You are entering into a partnership. The importance of a shared vision for the company. Are we going to grow? Are we going to enter into pharmaceuticals, medicine, feed? What is the vision of the company? And keep in mind that you will likely be working together in both good times and challenging times. And having a strong partnership is really important. As potential investors are doing what's called due diligence on your company. Due diligence is a term that means they check up on your people, your technology, your structure, your infrastructure. That is part of what they do in preparing for an investment. You should do the same thing on your potential investors as well. What is their track record? How did they work? Talk to some people, talk to some of the other companies that they have invested in. And then also keep in mind that the people that are making the investment decision, typically a partner or a senior person in the company that is investing in you, or the entity that's investing in you, that may not be the people that you're working with on a daily basis going forward. So say a partner will approve the investment and then they hand that off to someone else. So as you go into and finding a new shareholder, please make sure that you meet the people that you also will be working with on a daily basis. Next slide. And this is just from an investor perspective, like I am, and I also raise fundraising. But the question is, when do you raise funds? When do you bring in capital? And you typically have two scenarios. One is when you need the money. I don't think we need to talk about that, as pretty self-explanatory. The other scenario is at value inflection points. And that means that it is very beneficial for you to raise money when you have a so-called value inflection point. That may be when you have good money, or good news, I should say. You have favorable test results. You have secured some intellectual property. When you make your first sale, etc. That is a good time to raise capital, to raise funds, and you have much more leverage than what you otherwise would have if you're desperate to raise money. As an investor, I would like to come into a company that really needs the money. I will get a higher percentage of the share capital at that point in time. You, as a startup company, are in much better position to raise money when you have some good news and you're selling the good news. Next slide. And then this is kind of I think this is an interesting slide in that you have different capital or different capital partners depending upon the company's development and life cycle. So you're getting started. You need to incorporate a company. You need to get a balance sheet. You need to find an accountant. You need to have a business plan, and that is called pre-seed. It is great if you can do that yourself. Scrape together what you have, borrow some money on your house. That is the kind of money that you put together yourself. And then when you're ready to start, buying some equipment, hiring some people, whatnot, you really want to go at it with friends and family. And friends doesn't necessarily mean personal friends, but friendly partners and family, people you know that can put in, oh, I don't know, $50,000, $100,000, just so you're ready to start. And you want to have friendly people on your shareholder ledger at that stage. A term that is often used, at least in North America and also Europe, is called a family office. And that would typically be like a person like the Røkke family, the Witzøe family, wealthy families in the region that are somewhat in related industries. If you can get them on your shareholder ledger, that is good news at an early stage. Another term that you hear often is what's called angel investors. And angel investors are typically retired business people that have a little bit of money, that wants to be involved, want to help out. Angel investors can be on the geographic basis in a certain city, or they can be industry oriented, chemical industry, maritime industry, technology industry, biotech, whatever it may be. So angel investors is a really good source of capital. Not only can they bring capital to the table, but if you find the right angels, they can really help you with the development of the company. So I would highly recommend that you research and look into angel investors as the company is getting going. And then I also realized that maybe not everyone knows the difference between venture capital, private equity, and hedge funds. It's terms that you all hear about them as bankers, but they are very different companies. Venture capital is early stage. They are looking for new business ideas. They are looking for companies that can change the industry that they're in, and very early stage for venture capital. Private equity is a little later in the stage of the company's life cycle. However, a private equity investor could be interesting to talk to if they are in a related industry. For example, if you have someone that is into to salmon farming, or they have a feed processing, and they can see the seaweed as a complementary investment to their existing portfolio of companies, that is an interesting area to look for potential investors. Hedge funds, and the term hedge really means a fence or a häck på norsk. It's kind of a strange term, but these are big companies that provide absolute returns. They're meaning we're going to make money in good times and bad times. We invest long, we go short, and they're typically publicly traded large billion-dollar type entities. And traditionally, they have not been involved in startups. They're more public companies, commodities and whatnot, but that is another area that is now becoming more involved in startup companies. In particular in venture capital and private equity, be aware that these these companies, they raise funds from their investors. So you got people putting money into a venture capital fund, and they establish a fund called Fund A, for example. And they have typically a 5 to 7 year horizon on their investments, meaning that when they get money from their investors and they are investing in companies, they want to exit this business typically within a 5 to 7 year period. So when you get these sort of investors on your ledger, it's important that you have a common understanding of how long they want to be involved in your company and what do you do at the potential exit. Then you have, after you have the seed money and you started the company, then you have other types of investments, calling Series A or B and C. Series A is typically where you have proven out the technology, it works, and you're ready to scale it. So the investors that are coming in there, they are based upon technology being proven, and we're just going to scale it up. We're going to buy more equipment, we're going to leverage this and have more volume. So that's where you have Series A, Series B, and Series C. Okay, next slide. And then you have other sources of funding. Universities, government support, other private ventures, strategic investors, and that term is used typically for companies that already are in the industry or related industries to what you're raising funds for. Those are great opportunities for development, support, and access to resources. In fact, some of the Norwegian participants may remember the former Minister of Research and Higher Education, Tora Aasland. She came to Utah and I hosted her for a couple of days, telling her how we in Utah are working on the ecosystem between universities, private and governmental entities for entrepreneurship and helping local businesses get started. From an investor's perspective, the important thing with these type of other sources of funding is who owns the technology, who owns the intellectual property and the know-how. And that is important. Say you get a university support or governmental support. Universities, as they help out, typically own the technology that is developed when you are on campus. As soon as you move off campus with the company, then the technology is yours. And then the technology that was developed at the university, you pay a licensing, or you have a licensing or royalty agreement with the university. So you can fully use the technology, but it's owned by the university. That may be the case with strategic investors and other entities as well. So really keep that in mind as you go forward and get new investors. Make sure that you control as much of the technology, the IP and know-how as you can. Next slide. And then very few companies get going with just 1 or 2 people. So you're probably working on your project with a team of good people. Having your team participate from an equity perspective in your startup is a great way to align interests and reward your team members. So instead of raising capital, as people are working with you, you give them shares in the company. That can be in different forms. You can give shares, warrants, or options. Those are typically awarded at milestones when we get our technology approved or time spent. You reward them by days spent on the company, or just by the passage of time. You know, you get 1,000 shares every year that you work on the project or something like that. My experience is that is the time for you to bring in accountants, a CPA, chartered accountants, or a visor, because even with the best of intentions, when you have these shares, options, warrants, Someone will eventually say you should have granted me shares instead of options or vice versa. Tax consequences, lock-up periods, valuations, and the list goes on. So I would highly recommend that you consider using equity as a way to reward your team members, but bring in someone professional as you set up these structures. Next slide. Loans are typically the cheapest funding that you can get. And when you look at loans, you look at the interest rate, the amortization schedules or the payback schedules, and any security that you have to offer for the debt that you incur. However, keep in mind what we call loan to own actors. These companies appears to be regular lenders. They are interested in lending to startup companies, and they're your best friends, and wow, you think, okay, I'm only paying 5% interest on this funding, and they're going to fund me for 10 years, so that is fantastic. But they may put in other terms and conditions into your loan. For example, minimum cash balance requirements that may be difficult to comply with. So then, in a year or two, you may hit the rough spot and you dip below the minimum cash balance, and then these actors may use the breach of these covenants as a leverage point to get more money, more shares, or more out of the company. So just because loans and debt is cheap, you really need to keep in mind all the terms and conditions in the funding. Next slide. Well, I think that was about 15 minutes. So you may say, so what should I do? Should I hire an investment banker? And I would say probably not at an early stage. You can't afford it. They will take over. They just want to build a company and flip it and sell it 2 years later. So probably not hire an investment banker. Rather, what I recommend that you do is to have a financial professional on your board of directors. Someone that you trust, someone that's skilled in finance. You can compensate such a resource with shares and options, but you really want to have someone that you can talk to, that you can trust as you go through and you finance and fund your company. Maybe Innovation Norway could help you introduce you to someone. And as you go forward, you want to build your business, not spend time on financing and related details. So try to find a finance professional that you put on your board of directors. Next slide. Well, questions and hopefully some answers.
Right, thank you, Lars Erik. I've been taking a lot of notes of your presentation. I think I'll post it on my wall at the office. You got some questions here. I'll read it up to you. Do you have experience with social enterprises? And how is this viewed by investors, where excess profits cannot be used for shareholders, but has to be reinvested in the company?
Yeah, that is really a starting trend, isn't it? Social investors, social media fundraising, startups, that is a new trend. I think it would be difficult at this stage, given that we have what we're trying to accomplish with the OSC, Ocean Seaweed Center. We're trying to get commercial interests. So I think that is more applicable in the IT and social media area than it would be in a seaweed startup. That's probably my comment to that.
Thank you. And there's another one from Texlo, one of the main players, I would say, in Norway for seaweed products to human food consumption. Okay, he's asking you, we have just started our planning for entering a Series A round to take our seaweed products out to the world. How do you see the interest in seaweed-based investment in the US?
That's a great question. And one of my companies, I had an explosives company in California that I just sold. And in California and Oregon, you have large seaweed players, and in the Bay Area, you do have interest for seaweed investments. Dulce is actually produced in Monterey, California, and they're using a land-based, so they're trucking in the water from the Monterey Bay and producing dulce, and then sea urchin is not quite algae, but that is a coming industry. So I think that there is interest and good money and supporting money that already have commercial experience. And for food consumption, of course, you need what in the US called FDA, Federal Drug Administration approval. And I think that would be a great source if you wanted to think about also entering the American market, just someone that can help you with the regulatory approval process in North America.
Thank you. And there's one more question for you here. What is a typical share percentage investors demand in a startup in the US?
As high as possible. No, it depends on the starting area, and the premise of that question is really, what is the investment that is considered $1 million, and then what is the valuation of the company that you are putting out for potential investors. And valuation is a very tricky question. I would say that most companies that have an idea, that have an idea for technology that is proven either in the lab scale or bench scale, or there is some value behind it, you start at the valuation of $5 million. And then, you know, if this is a seed round, you may bring in $500,000. The math doesn't quite work like that, but for now, say, you know, that is a 10% or so in the seed round. So I think, you know, 5 to 10% in the seed round is not uncommon.
Nice, thank you. Thank you very much, Lars Erik. I've asked you in our parallel session later today to have a critical view on our Ocean Seaweed Center establishment. I'm looking forward to that, and also I'm a bit scared, but I hope it will go okay.
As you should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet one.
See you later. We asked all of your audience to challenge you what kind of products you think you will see in the future, what kind of seaweed products. A lot of you have answers, and as you can see, one of the main things you think will be available in the future is snacks, medicine, and cosmetics. And that's also what's in line what we've been hearing here today. So maybe in 10 years' time, this will be a common commodity for all of us. Also, we would like to challenge you for a next question, which I think is very much in line with what we are talking about today. Why is it so hard to commercialize or earn money on seaweed? And now we will have a 15 minutes break. I encourage you all to go out and get some fresh air, go get a new cup of coffee, and then we'll meet again here in 15 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back for the second part of the day 2 of the Algemania conference. Our speaker now is Mari Dorthe Jønstad Michaelsen. Are you with us, Mari Dorthe?
I am.
Oh, thank you. Great. Mari Dorte is a financial advisor at Innovation Norway. She provides consultancy services and work with funding for growth companies. Also, commercialization strategies, and you work with the transition from early stage startup to growth companies. Please start the presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Mari Dorte Michaelsen, and I'm a senior consultant at Innovation Norway, working mostly with our financial services and are strengthening the ecosystem for startups and growth companies. I will present Innovation Norway and our services in order for you to better understand how we work to release the potential in industry innovation and growth. Innovation Norway aims to assist Norwegian businesses grow and find new markets, and local presence is therefore of crucial concern to us. We have offices in all regions of Norway and in more than 20 countries across the world. Innovation Norway is the government and regional authorities' main instrument for realizing value creating industrial and commercial development throughout the country. We aim to stimulate commercially and socio-economically profitable business development and realize the commercial potential of the regions. Now, our sub-goals is to create more successful entrepreneurs, more companies with growth potential, and more innovative business clusters. Our strategy is to build strong regional partnerships to increase value creation across the country. We will solve global challenges and contribute to sustainable growth and export. We will give local ideas global opportunities and be a sparring partner for businesses in all regions. We will restructure and create new jobs for many years to come, and we need to increase exports and take new global positions. Now, we have more than 40 delegating authorities for our funding and missions. We receive annual assignment letters with specifications on services and what to prioritize. And in addition, we have internal framework and processes to ensure efficient use of state funding. And above all this, we are bound by the EEA agreement. Now, state aid is by default prohibited, but there are a few exemptions related to research, development, and environment. These exemptions are specified in the General Block Exemption Regulation, and it is there to ensure equal conditions of competition in the EU. Now, the combination of the exemption regulation, the state funding of our services, the assignment letters from delegating authorities, and our internal framework for operations therefore regulates who can receive support, how much support can be granted, which activities can be supported, and which projects are prioritized. We are a sparring partner, and we contribute to sustainable growth and exports through delivering expertise, networks, and capital, with the latter perhaps most known in the community. Our advisory services are for companies with ambitions for further development and growth. We are a sparring partner to discuss new business opportunities. We offer individual advice on innovation processes, business opportunities, market clarification, and sustainable development, to mention a few. We also connect in the business support system. We are the one door into the business support system. We also have courses and competence programs spanning from the early startup and into the global growth. I would also like to mention that we have a digital competence center that is free of charge, and all you need is an email to register. The Clusters program is an important motor in business development through co-opetition. New business ideas grow within the networks, and established companies contribute with experience and expertise. The Clusters program strengthens the businesses within by building networks between suppliers and customers. And the data shows that the member companies work more together, have higher employment, bigger revenues, and more value creation than non-member companies. So I strongly urge you to find your network. And then is the capital, the financing of innovation and development. This is mainly risk relief through grants and liquidity supply through loans. The grants are used for projects where the socio-economic benefit of the project is considerable and technical risk is high. They are reserved for Norwegian companies that have ambitions to create value through innovation. And the schemes apply to businesses throughout the country and within all industries. And the loans here, mainly the innovation loans, may be used for the commercialization of new solutions by strengthening working capital in a growth and internationalization phase. And we may very well combine the solutions for the right projects. What is it we are looking for? I guess it's no surprise. We have all heard about the UN sustainability goals. And investing in sustainability is both morally and socio-economically the right thing to do, but it will also be commercially profitable. And sustainability will be the red thread in everything we do at Innovation Norway, and now and in the future. And we can promise you that we will ask questions about the company's green profile and about the entrepreneurs' socially, economically thinking and willingness to contribute to a sustainable future for all of us. How will you build a sustainable business model? We want to make the answers count. Now, we have identified 5 megatrends that affect Norwegian businesses and industry. This is urbanization, climate change and resource scarcity, globally economical change of power, demographic and social change, and technological breakthroughs. We believe the most promising opportunities for Norwegian companies can be found in the area of green innovation. But other social challenges also require sustainable answers, for example, within the health and care sector. And also in the intersection between the public and private sectors, innovations can be created that provide the basis for new business development. And we are in the middle of the green shift. We need to step up our efforts in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And there is great potential for new profitable businesses and jobs that deliver green solutions. And development of new projects and services require access to both network, capital, and expertise. So Innovation Norway provides relevant services and is an efficient use of public money to release innovation growth and potential. Now, what journey lies ahead of you? Norwegians love mountain hiking, and therefore I often use the image of hiking when explaining the differences in startup businesses. When building a business, you need resources and a plan. And such as when hiking, it is evident that you will need few resources or preparations when hiking in a family park compared to that of climbing Mount Everest. In the same way, some business ideas need a lot of research and development before becoming market ready, and you need to plan your business, identify the necessary resources and risks, and build a competent team accordingly. And data shows that 7 out of 10 startups fail. Why is that? There was no market need. They ran out of cash, or they didn't have the right team. Now, it's a lot easier to satisfy a need rather than create one and convince people that they should spend money on it. And with the cash, if you're realistic at the beginning, you can plan to start with enough money that will last you to the point where your business is up and running and cash is perhaps flowing in. And with the team, you need a dedicated team that is diverse in competences and skills to balance each other. Therefore, we look for market confirmation, committed capital from investors or your own team, and competent team. We think like an investor, but we are more willing to take risk in order to release industry potential and growth. As the investors say, it's all about the people, the product, and the potential. But when applying for us, there are some qualifications or critical criteria that must be met. The first one is, as stated in our organization name, innovation. The project should involve innovation at an international level. This can relate to product, business model, or market innovation. Now, why is the solution under development far better compared to today's solutions, and how will your customers recognize this? Market potential. Now, the technology or service should have considerable potential for growth in an international market. The project should include a good, realistic market strategy and a scalable business model. And with impact, you need to quantify which impact the project is expected to have on the environment and how the business model is sustainable. And we support business growth in order to create value and jobs in Norway. And the applicants must explain how the project contributes to this. And then it's the ability to complete the project. This has to do with financial, human, and technological resources and the timing of the project. We need to see that you have the ability to see the project through to completion. And then it's the additionality. This point can be a bit difficult to explain, but it has to do with the effect government funding can have in triggering the implementation of the project, both speed, scope, and effect, and thus releasing private capital and risk sharing. To sum up, we prioritize innovation projects that have great utility, high degree of innovation, and likelihood of success. We look for projects that can solve big problems and at the same time create business value. And there are financing for different phases, from clarification of idea through development into market introduction and growth. Now, the most common grant schemes are linked to environmental technology, innovation in collaboration, and more environmentally friendly use of bioresources. And in addition, there are EU schemes for radical innovation. We differ from the Norwegian Research Council by focusing on the research and development that is close to entering the market, but still needs specific market clarification, business model testing, or piloting before reaching full market potential. So projects presented to Innovation Norway therefore needs a clear market strategy, not just research goals. Just contact us to help you sort this out. We aim to assist Norwegian businesses grow. We believe in both a local and international presence. We are one door into the business support system. We will connect with the right partners. We have advisory services. We try to find potential room for maneuver for your projects. We will identify relevant solutions and programs for you. And we follow you up. We will provide insights and analysis. We support businesses with ambitions, and we look for new market growth. We combine the relevant resources. Companies need access to network, capital, and expertise in order to succeed. In short, we give local ideas global opportunities. Thank you for your time. And if there's any questions, I will try to be available for that.
Thank you, Møre. Excellent. There's one question which might be a bit difficult to answer, but I'll give it to you, and you have to try your best. Okay. With the new government in Norway announcing 150 million NOK cut to Innovation Norway budget, do you see this affecting the development of the seaweed sector and blue economy?
Oh, what a question. Not in the short run. The cut is mainly for our internal affairs and how we are organized. And many of these effects will we see when we are done with the big digitalization project that we have ongoing. So this is not in on the frameworks or the budgets that are related to the funding of such projects.
Nice. And I also saw you mention that you have like a free database or bank with information. Is that also free for any user on the internet or just for Norwegians?
All you need is an email address. So anyone with an email address may register on our Digital Competence Center.
Nice. And also I was just wondering, do you find what type of businesses come to you at what stage? Do you have to have, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
In my experience, all kinds of phases and all kinds of businesses. We support all kinds of industries in Norway. So I work mostly with the startups and early growth companies, but we also have the established companies coming to us when in a growth phase or looking at new international possibilities. So all kinds of phases are interesting for us. We look at how to create more value in Norway. So any phase, but you need to be, as a startup at least, you need to be established, you need to have clarified the market. But we are also there for the phase of clarifying the market. So from early on to growth.
Thank you. I think one of the reasons we wanted Innovation Norway to come was that we see that it seems like the market for seaweed products are larger abroad than it is in Norway itself. And that Innovation Norway might be a very good tool for a lot of our entrepreneurs in the seaweed sector. Thank you very much, Møre, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Annelise Chapman. And I think if you have been in the seaweed industry, you know Annelise Chapman. She has a background as a researcher in marine science and ecology. She is also a founder of Tango Seaweed, which is one of the main players in Møre Romsdal County. And I must say, Annelise, when I knew that you would stop being a researcher and go into seaweed business, I thought that, okay, yeah, it is really a future in the seaweed business because you know what you're talking and what you're doing. So this talk is titled Not by the Book, Surviving the First Years as a Seaweed Startup. The screen is yours, Annelise. Please start your presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me and see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
In the full screen mode.
Thanks very much for this introduction. It's almost, a little bit, I don't know, I get red in my face. I don't know if you see it, but thanks for that. At the same time, it gives me the opportunity to speak here about all of the things that were different than we expected when we started. So therefore, the title, this is not definitely meant not as a recommendation on how to do things, but it's really an honest record of our journey so far. And at least now we're still alive. But I'm going to tell you mostly of the challenges and the opportunities with the journey that we are on. Somehow I can't manage to move yes, here we are. So we see we look at the development of our business as a journey with seaweeds towards hopefully, of course, a successful business and a healthy planet. And I really appreciate the talks of the other speakers so far today, because you tackle very many things that actually I will get into. And this dialogue, this kind of dialogue, is really important to have to get the whole sector going and with developing new stakeholders. A little bit about Tango Seaweeds in terms of dates and figures. We founded the company, myself and Bjørn Otterlei, in 2016. Yeah, I have a background in seaweed research and Bjørn from seafood markets, so we thought that was a good starting point for what we wanted to do. By now, the company has developed quite organically in terms of the team. We are 3 permanent employees and 8 to 10 seasonal production staff. And in addition, we are part of various networks, and not least, our shareholder team has grown substantially in several stages. Also not quite by the book, as Lars explained us to us earlier, but really significantly helped us to shape where the company is going and how we're going to take it there. So we have enormous resources in both the team of employees, partners, and not least shareholders, and combine a lot of strategic competences throughout the whole value chain, which is incredibly important. But this wasn't like that from the beginning. So this diversity, that's one of my hobby horses, as some of you already know, but especially also in the team in Tango, that's really important because that's how we can develop also before we become economically profitable. You don't have to read all this on the development of milestones. This slide is mainly to show you that when we founded the company in 2016, we started right at it. So we hopped right in, applied for cultivation licenses, and that's where our focus lay at the beginning in order to really get going. That's where our competences were. And with it, we had to develop technical solutions, of course, a lot of competence throughout the value chain. And since there was no specialization or a ready-made value chain or ready-made market, we also had to work on this subsequently. But we started immediately with the cultivation. And of course, the production of seaweed, that was the core of our focus at the beginning. That was my background, and I still think that a lot of the challenges are there, and they are right at the core of cultivating seaweed. So how to do it and finding mostly biological and ecological solutions, but also, of course, technical solutions as we move along. At that time, the early reference points in order to find partners and investors and finance the capital needs, especially installing a farm and so on. The early reference points were quite large scale, and they were out everywhere. On the left-hand corner, it says Produktive Hav. This was a report published in 2012 from various institutions in Norway that predicted a large scale-up of the seaweed sector to a revenue of 40 billion Norwegian krone by 2050, and this amount of biomass production. So quite a large prognosis. On the other hand, we were often compared or referenced to the salmon aquaculture, and were asked, well, will seaweed cultivation be as large and important as salmon aquaculture in Norway? Or the opposite kind of negative reference point was, will seaweed be the next fiasco like we have experienced with the blue mussel cultivation? On the other hand, the global seaweed production was another reference point. 30% of all aquaculture is for seaweeds on a global scale. And in Norway, we have a long-standing production of alginate from wild harvesting of kelps, which again is a global industry, and we were often compared to that. Or those were the reference points we had. So with these reference points in mind, we also contacted investors and potential partners and so on. We didn't know any better, except that we didn't expect to reach those reference points, of course, immediately, but that's what we had to orientate ourselves on and try to get others interested. So when we talked to investors and got the first funding in, we worked with production of 2 kelp species, had a relatively short timeline in which we expected to gradually but significantly increase yield, upscaling a farm from a pilot size to full size of the concession area we had within several years, and gradually reduce production costs to compensate for what we expected would be a price fall in the market that we looked at for a high quality food segment. And there again, we had some figures which were to some degree guesstimates, but they were relatively high. Our products we saw as a raw material food ingredient, and we were lucky to get capital investment mainly for the infrastructure at sea from early angel investors, which shared this vision and were hooked on this prospect of this becoming a very important industry. However, these early reference points, now in retrospect, I say this, they might as well have been in outer space. Because what we have to deal with when we started as a single company were very, very basic challenges and questions. Everything from how do I get the cultivation license, how do I design a farm and where to place it, where do I get my seedlings from, why does my seaweed not grow, what's all the challenges with seaweed biology and natural ecosystem, all the variation and so on the one hand. On the market side, we mostly started at the very, very, very basics, explaining what is seaweed. Yes, you can eat it. No, it's not just disgusting and it's healthy instead. In fact, how does it taste? Well, not all seaweed tastes the same, and so on and so forth. So very basic things. And also requests for deliver a number of species to the same price as wild harvesters in Europe. And the question, well, why should it be so expensive? Or even, well, if this is so good, can you deliver 500 tons yesterday? And not least the question about quality standards and can we prove that it is safe to eat? So these were the day-to-day challenges. And of course, they were a million miles away from the ambition of this really, what I call reference points in outer space. So what we needed was really not reference points that were now in retrospect, I say this, designed for a whole new industry. They are very good to have, these big ambitions. But we needed reference point and tangible goals that we could employ as a company and approach potential investors with, and design a way to a profitable business at a company level. So we learned from that, and gradually we developed these more tangible goals, both on the production side. We were much more restrained on what we expected in terms of learning about cultivation, and that it would take a longer time than we had expected, but also on the market side, developing partnerships, developing products together with other partners, branding them, technical innovation, and so on and so forth. So from just thinking about, or not just, but thinking about the production side and learning step by step about production and reliability and safe production, also environmentally safe, we of course added the rest of the value chain that we also had to work with. We had to build the market. It wasn't ready. We had to educate our market. And all of this was very useful in both learning ourselves, understanding our customers, and really contributing to building knowledge around this at every level. So in the next stage, the next stages of financing and taking the company forward, we became more careful and more even more transparent, and shared what we thought was going to be the way forward for the company. but also which challenges we saw and which, not least, which timeline. So we made it very clear that we needed to be patient, and everybody who wanted to walk this journey with us needed to be patient as well. At the same time as we try to identify very tangible goals and business segments that we could develop realistically. And together with these new shareholders and partners that would share the main visions and goals. So we diversified our product segments into raw material, food ingredient, but also gradually higher value products, and what I call services here, which are both services that we provide in terms of education and consulting and R&D, but also services in the longer term of the seaweed farm to the ecosystem, which are in the process now to be commercialized. So the capital needs are continue to be for infrastructure, but even more now personal resources in terms of developing, especially the production still, but also marketing and R&D side. And so we designed a product scheme over 10 years, a business development scheme, which is not entirely dependent on large volumes and low production costs, because we still see a risk of being able to upscale in the near future in a safe way, safe and reliable way. The other thing that happened is that we gradually moved from a single bottom line concept to a triple bottom line concept, which is becoming more and more customary for both investors and the business world and society in general, which includes the concept of economic profit, of course, but also environmental value creation, and not least a societal or people value creation. And whereas the green and the red ones, so profit and planet and environment, we have just heard from Innovation Norway also that they are more regularly integrated now. In other words, that we earn money by being green and acting not only sustainably but environmentally positive. The third component is often not so clearly commercialized in, or is not necessarily seen so much as value creation yet. But we really try to take this more into the picture now. And our path, our journey towards being economically profitable is already a value creation journey where we can create value on the people side. So, as I said, the new green values, we got a new number of reference points, also in outer space, I would say, large scale, for the entire sector the last years. So, for example, the Seaweed for Europe group has published a report where this is very evident. And they consider everything from ecosystem services, climate stabilization, carbon storage, and feeding the world sustainably. But also here, at the company level, there are a number of, I wouldn't necessarily say barriers, but they don't match our scale of operation, and we need more tangible green goals also. So by working with that, I put this on the next slide because they don't fit in the bubbles. As a company, we look at production, what we call according to nature's principles. So in nature, we know only complete resource cycles and circularity. So we are asking us, what would be the equivalent of a regenerative or permaculture farm on land in terms of seaweed aquaculture? And we are working actively. At the moment, we have a trainee from the Netherlands who helps us to do this. We're working actively on how to implement this. You see a lot of questions here at the moment, but this is still under development. But we take this into account in very concrete terms. On the other hand, our environmental profile concerns the entire value chain. And by that, I mean processes, materials we use, products and services. And we integrate challenging our suppliers on these environmental profiles, and in that way, moving together towards becoming a greener business in various aspects. The third component of a triple bottom line and value creation, the people component, we also see this as a very important part on our journey, and especially in this period where we haven't reached economic viability yet. So one aspect of this people component is education, learning and collaboration. This happens all the time and at all levels. Every time we talk to a customer, to a potential investor, to a bank, within our team, to schools, to our neighbors, they ask us everything about Seaweed and the business, and we have the opportunity to tell a fantastic story and also share our challenges and all the questions. There's not easy answers, but here we have the opportunity to bring together and forward not only our company Otango, but the whole idea of Seaweed for society with all its aspects. So that's a fantastic opportunity where we gain and learn and enjoy throughout this journey towards full profitability. The other one is the question of participation, ownership, and purpose and joy. Ownership concerns, on the one hand, of course, the shareholders, founders and shareholders in the company, but also we talk a lot about immaterial ownership, because all of us who work in Tango or who are partners in Tango, they gradually and in very many different ways, we observe, build a kind of material ownership to the subject of seaweed. Some from the perspective of food, some from the perspective of technology, some from the perspective of operating the seas, and so on and so forth. And this together is incredible value, which we can harness in the long term. So in summary, I would say our journey is about creating value towards profit for the planet and for the people involved for the company, but in the longer term also for an entire sector. So instead of having a concrete focus on the target or our destination with this journey, with very large-scale goals, but a target which is often moving, we've switched a little bit more and having focus on the path and all the steps that happen and the value that can be created as we move along in different ways. In that way, we see an organic development of the business and finding the right matches and people who share that vision, everybody from employees to partners to shareholders, not least, is incredibly important, and our way to communicate it and share both the visions but also the challenges and being honest about it, that's extremely important, and I think we have learned a lot on this in these terms. So valuing shares and shareholders on the one hand, but also sharing values is very, very important. In this, we're not operating alone. It is still important that we find our place within larger networks and the entire industry with many other shareholders. But we are one component that makes this entire industry and this entire sector more diverse as we go along. I think that will help us to fill this gap between the individual company challenges and the very large scale and long-term goals of the sector. And at the end, I would like to comment on the name of the conference, which I think is actually well picked because it, in my opinion, it reflects what I sometimes would even call a hype about seaweed. Seaweed is often presented as a silver bullet to all our challenges. However, I like to think it's really a pathological condition. and it's often combined with deep depression. You can be very euphoric and enthusiastic and so on, see incredible possibilities, but then after these expectations, the depths of a depression can be incredibly deep. So I would sometimes perceive this as a hinder, actually, because the people that we talk to, outsiders or potential shareholders, they get this manic picture of the seaweed world. Everything's possible and very fast. And it's up to us then to really reflect on and dampen the expectations and draw them down to a realistic level, and not least what we can do as a company. So my suggestion is maybe rather more algae and less mania, and stability and resilience and not pathology. However, I think it's a very good title for the conference, and it really got me going in terms of how I think about this as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Annalisa. It's true about the title. We considered it a couple of years ago, and then we landed on algae and not Algemania. But I also really liked the concept. I don't know, it just kind of hit me. So this year we chose Algemania, but I agree. One of the reasons we didn't do it a couple of years ago was that it is a disorder, right? So really nice presentation, and I also have seen several, and I remember the first one was like the algae is not, it's like potatoes and apples, the different species taste different. So I think you have done a lot of work on how to educate people on what algae is, and also I know you had some challenges to understand the licensing process, which I'm part of. Hello. And instead of complaining, you just like made a new project, how to do the licensing process, and made it simpler for everybody. And this link or net web page are still used by us in the management. So even though it's not by the book, I must say your road has been very impressive, and I don't know how, but you have had a capacity to do so many different things, which have helped many others. And also, I know you have been very active in the cluster application process for the Norwegian Seaweed Association. So I just wonder, how do you find the collaboration between seaweed entrepreneurs? Because it's somewhat similar products you produce and want to sell in almost the same market.
Yes, I think that's a really important point, that I think we're kind of testing the waters in many ways. And what I say, when the reference points are so enormous, or we are kind of designing the growth of the industry with one path, then it's very difficult for an individual farmer or stakeholder to not appear in competition with each other. So therefore, I like to talk about developing the industry and the sector in terms of diversity and becoming different from each other and finding our niche, each of us, where there's a place for large-scale production offshore kelp species, but also land-based production of other species, small-scale farms, and so on. So I think that will make it much easier to really complement each other and move forward as a sector, while at the same time having our own niche and not stepping onto each other's toes while we are developing. And the other thing is, of course, we also need to complement each other and help, because once the market really, or we already get requests from a potentially very large market, and nobody's able to deliver alone. So sharing the knowledge and operating together and complementing each other, that's really important. And I think we've made really big progress in terms of the combining forces in the existing association and the application towards becoming a cluster and arena networking.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. As for now, we'll soon be ready for lunch. I just want to remind you that we have a Menti going on. One of our goals is to find out what should we focus on as a Seaweed Center. And the value chain is not complete is the most important thing. But I think all of these topics are very, very important for us to focus on in the future. I just want to remind you that after lunch, we will have parallel sessions. There's one with Pierrick about industrial processing on seaweed. And there's one hosted by Møre Romsdal County Municipality about the Ocean Seaweed Center. I hope to see you there. You will find the links in the email or in the chat. And then we'll meet again in half an hour. Thank you. Welcome back to the last section of the Algemania conference. Today we had two parallel sessions, one about the processing of seaweed and one about Ocean Seaweed Center. First, Pierrick, are you with us? Yes, Pierrick, you are here. How would you sum up your parallel session today? Please unmute yourself.
Yes, well, yeah, it's very difficult to sum up. We had a first round with a presentation from seaweed cultivator, seaweed producer, two technology suppliers of drying technology, and one user of seaweed biomass to biomaterial, bioplastics in that case. So they presented some insights on industrial seaweed processing, and we had a discussion, a group discussion about topics, how to make how to make it happen on an industrial scale. So how to reduce production cost and how to ensure year-round production. So I'm not sure we had some really definitive answers to that, but it seems that the fermentation process was at least very relevant to many producers, since it's low cost, quite easy to implement. But there might be some limitation about the end product. For instance, when it comes to using the material as bioplastics, we don't know yet if this is fitting. So that could be some new directions for future research. Yes, we also discussed about small scale farming. How these people get to process their production, because it has to be also several scale. I mean, we always talk about upscaling, but not everything has to be like extra large scale. So it has to be a room for these producers to still make products and process the biomass. And in that sense, the shared facilities that we have discussed and that you probably have discussed also during the parallel session is relevant here. We had also at last a comment on that, just raising the question if this should be like fully centralized or more locally, perhaps centralized in a smaller scale, that several ocean seaweed centers would solve the problem of the seaweed industry in these countries. So yes, and we talked also about sustainability, that sustainability, or like seaweed is, the seaweed industry is regarded as a sustainable industry, but when it comes to the processing, when we take that into consideration, so perhaps the carbon footprint is not so neutral or not so low. And when we include the drying process in the picture, that makes the footprint worse. So at the end, we have to look broadly to that picture and compare the carbon footprint of a seaweed-based product to the other products that seaweed are competing with. And also look at the energy source that is used to process the seaweed and how this can be reduced. So it can be from using like wind power, industrial excess heat, this kind of things. Yes, and we also, of course, discuss about food safety and iodine. That's the ongoing topic, and what's the way to go by the regulation, or how, like one of the comments was that perhaps the regulation should also be adapted to be like relevant to the food, to public health, but also to the seaweed industry. So yes, that was the main topics that we have approached.
Thank you for your sum up. 2 hours with discussion is not that easy to sum up. I have also challenged Lars Johansson if you want to give some sentences about the parallel session at Ocean Seaweed Center. Could you please unmute yourself?
I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, okay, thank you.
You are good.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I think we had a very interesting session. We started up with Bengt going through the history, going back to 2014, I think it was, with the idea of the Ocean Seaweed Center. So he kind of took us through the development and the evolution of that project. We then had various inputs. I was given the somewhat difficult task to be the critical, to give the critical input, and I think I did. And then we had others presenting, and to put it in summary, I think the idea of having an OSC, and for people to pool their resources, to work together, to share knowledge, so not each seaweed farmer or each participant in the value chain has to invent or reinvent the wheel, to build upon each other. I think it's a great idea, and I thought and I felt that was the consensus in the group that we had. It looked like we had some 15-20 people, and then it probably comes down to how we do it. The devil is in the detail. How do you set it up? How do you actually execute upon this? And then also taking the challenge of graciously accept fylkeskommunens contribution to get this started, but at the same time be prepared to make this a standalone and self-sustained business going forward. But it's tough to speak on behalf of all the participants, but the idea and the concept, I think it's really great, and it's going to take the industry forward.
Thank you, Lars. I totally agree. It will be our largest challenge, I think, to make this a standalone business within 3 years. But we will try our best. And then I would like some concluding remarks and thank you all for participating in this conference. We had some great speakers. I wish we had some more time to have more questions to all of them. And now the organizing committee would like to say farewell and hopefully see you again next time. Or we will be. Are you ready?